Greetings and salutations, everyone. This is the Sprackle podcast hosted by yours truly, Coy White. You may notice that today's episode is early, and that's because my guest turned the tables on me while meeting for his podcast to stretch my hosting skills and navigate an interview that I otherwise would have thought I was unprepared for. I'm very glad he did, as we had a fantastic conversation that was rather a symbolic turning point for me as a host, and a fun one at that. He hosts the Off the Strength podcast at 122 episodes going strong. Hint, you should definitely hit the link in the show notes for episode 122 after this. He's had his hands in fitness tech and surrounding industries for years. He's a talented moderator, high output content creator, and in a past life, a master trainer. I'm sure I'm missing a lot, but just as sure that this won't be our last episode with him. So without further ado, enjoy this unexpected collaboration with a new friend and fellow old soul, Tony Vidal.
Okay. It's the same reason why you didn't ask that question the other day is why I'm mad. And I hope you're recording this because it's going to come right back at you.
I was just going to ask whether or not he felt that sometimes having constraints is nice and which were his favorite ones.
Yeah.
Because he mentioned being in a gray room. That wasn't one of his 3 purple ones in his house.
Yeah.
Sean T, by the way, who I had never known before, but is apparently, is he a pretty big...
Oh my God.
Deal?
I feel older than I've ever felt before, but
I also just I wasn't really growing up in a place where I was watching fitness infomercials. So.
Right. I don't think that I was even that much of a fan of them at that point in time, to speak to you truthfully. It is just something that dominated late night TV. So he literally, when he got up and he did that little tilt, tuck, and tighten thing, those sayings would be things that I would see watching the most random shows, is just seeing this guy keep coming back and forth. And it's like, who the hell is Beachbody? Where is this thing coming from?
So he just kept putting features on all the mainstream stuff? Or?
All the features, mostly dance stuff, but then I think it was, I'm trying to think of what the first one, Hip Hop Abs was the one that you just saw everywhere. It just lived on TV. It didn't matter what time of day it was. If it was the middle of the day, all of those BS interview shows that they have in the middle of the day. It's like, all right, you're gonna see Sean T. It didn't matter if you're late night trying to watch something like a movie or something like that. It's like, oh, here's the same dude that was just on. Does he just live on TV? I don't understand. And then seeing how that comes around, he's put out a catalog of workout videos that are massive. Before, this is pre-internet DVD stuff. Mm-hmm. And if he were to do it today, he would be the biggest influencer on the fitness side out. It's just in all reality, that's how dominant those DVDs were at that point in time. The Insanity workout, all the rest of these things.
Because I'd heard of Insanity.
Yeah.
That was the one that was
further on.
Is that guy? But
yeah.
I never knew about any of the other stuff, and I never actually saw Insanity because I was too busy watching Cartoon Network and SpongeBob.
Yeah, but it would come on Cartoon Network. It'd be like, I'm watching Adult Swim, and who the hell is this dude just popping his shirt off, pop locking, going back and forth? It's like, what is this about?
I remember sometimes though, as a kid, those infomercials would suck you in. Mm-hmm. You'd be like,
that's exactly what it was.
You'd be so confused, but you can't leave.
I gotta buy this, obviously. And it's crazy because if you realistically look at it in the scope of what it is today, we were marketed to or at least I know I grew up in the age of marketing, direct to consumer marketing, now that I have language for it, but it was just wrapped in entertainment. Mm-hmm. Every TV show had a theme song. Every TV show had a action figure that you can purchase. Everything, it was all just one giant ad from time to time. It's like, wait, hold on. How much of this stuff do I actually like? And how much of it was just really good manipulation?
Yeah.
That just pulled me in.
No, I mean, one of the most shameful things that I rarely tell anyone is that at some point, I want to say I was probably 11, I got my parents to purchase the Kanoki foot pads.
The Kanoki foot pads. You got to break that out for me. I don't know what that is.
The Kanoki foot pads are... We were talking about a dentist before this that, to each their own, but I find the general sort of attribution of meridians that can't be, physically defined is a bit woo-woo. Kanoki foot pads are beyond woo-woo and into what is just bullshit. In every conceivable fashion. So they're these little adhesive pads with a little pouch of some special herbs and healing plants and shit.
Yeah.
And you stick them on your foot And then in the morning when you wake up and you peel them off, there's a guy named Leon Lush on YouTube who has made the most incredible satire of this, and I love it so much. But you peel it off your foot, and then it like turns green and icky, and it looks like, oh, these are all the toxins.
You were sucking the toxins out of your body with Kanoki foot pads.
And they do the same meridian shit. They are like, in this portion of your foot sucks toxins out of your heart directly. And I was, as like an 11-year-old that still thought bread was empty calories, like... And empty calories meant bread doesn't do anything. I'm looking at this like, well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And but how it works is the foot pads themselves have like a plastic or like a non-perforated side on one of them. Mm-hmm. So it just seals in heat in your foot, and then your foot sweats. Yeah. So someone put like a little water on this pouch, and then it like turns into this like disgusting looking green thing. Mm-hmm. And so I saw it was like a 20 or 30 minute infomercial, like when they took up those entire sections. Yeah. And I got my parents to buy those, and that's like one of my single largest regrets in life is that fact that. But also, it shows that just about anyone can turn around.
Oh yeah, you can always have that reckoning moment. But I will say that, first of all, at 11 years old, if you're thinking about the Kanoki foot pads taking out toxins of your body, you, sir, are a rarefied individual.
I was also...
Me at 11 was not thinking about that.
Well, I mean, I liked to think that I'd found out about stuff that no one else knew about. Yeah. Which, like, extrapolated to adults is a real problem because, like, there's this weird phenomenon that you'll notice that usually the people most susceptible to falling for, like, fake alternative medicines that like end up severely injuring or killing them or worsening their disease or making them forego like the actual treatment that would help them, they tend to skew as like more intelligent, affluent people. And part of the reasoning that's been proposed is that they're just like, because they're in that sphere, they always sort of have this bias to think that they found something that the rest of people just don't know about or like don't get.
You have the innovator's blindness because I'm so far out in front. Everybody else is just a little too late to the party. I can't really have the wherewithal to understand where's ego stop and where's reality start.
Yeah,
got that. But also, I would say in that same understanding, it goes across. I think the chasm back to not just really affluent people, but people who are desperate. You know, so on the top end, yeah, people who are affluent, who have all the resources, well, I'm obviously right. So, yes, I can get to here. The other side of that characteristic where if I don't know today better than tomorrow, better than the next day, well, if somebody allows me to come in and say, I can displace all the things that are bad in your life by putting X, Y, or Z here, and this is what's responsible, the causality is deferred.
Yeah.
And if I could defer your causality, I can get you to buy into damn near anything.
It's interesting because I would sort of, my intuition on that is that it does happen, but in a very different way on the opposite end of the spectrum. So in the affluent people, you have people reaching outside of the bounds of like their cultural upbringing and stuff. So like a lot of like Americans that are in that state will go to like Eastern medicines and things like that and practices and like find a random person in Chinatown giving them like unlabeled packets of herbs to cure their Lyme disease. Yeah. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I think what happens is people turn into what is customary a little more, and that becomes a downfall. So instead of instead of reaching outside of what you know and taking something that sounds really esoteric because it sounds esoteric, and that might be your like one up on everyone else. Right. It's like not doing the due diligence to find out like what your actual options are just takes you back to the doctor and gets you another set of prescriptions.
Right. Well, one is safety and one is adventure, right? But the end destination is the same. The journey is what changes inside of that conundrum. It's one of those things where, again, the people who need safety and who need to be pacified to the fact that you don't know what's happening and you probably never will, and that's not going to be an okay answer for you, is having the same conversation to the person that I know everything and I know exactly what's going on. It's like they're both daft thoughts. Yeah. They're both not fully formed, and the truth lies in the middle, but they're outliers. There's much like everything else. If you hear and you listen to anybody who's on extreme ends of either side of any argument, it's probably more common there than not. Let me calm down your emotion. Let me hear the principle of what you're saying. oh, you both actually kind of believe a lot more similar things than you might think, and the truth is probably a little close to the middle.
Yeah. And actually, you mentioned the emotions in that. I would be curious to get your take on what you've observed as a result of the corona outbreak. Because Instagram, you cannot find a single person that has posted an Instagram story and not find within their entire story one thing about coronavirus.
Yeah.
And for me, it has just highlighted the massive like tessitura of people's ability to communicate in a tribal way, or like in a way that's actually going to make some good.
Yeah, I think tribalism is at an all-time high. I think you are going to see whenever society is put to a test and it is an existential threat, which this can serve, right? A pandemic is a real enough threat.
Yeah.
And you couple that with the fact that, you know, we're in the age where everybody has equal say, but not everybody has equal exposure to information. Less people have equal exposure to correct information, and even fewer still have the humility to verify what they're saying before they say it. It's a perfect storm to see where tribalism will send people into different factions. So we are more connected, but my empirical bias is going to appear in every one of these things. The algorithms are only going to show you a reflection of you, because that's what you programmed it to do. How many people actually acknowledge that? So if everybody in the whole world is talking about this one thing and I don't, it's going to look really crazy. So I got to, even if I'm the most, you know, on Instagram, I'm the most like sought after, I'm the stable person, I am the pinnacle of everything that you could possibly ever get to. My fitness is here, my fashion is here, you know, and I have all the check marks for the perfect person. Most of that's a lie, at least in my eye, you know, or it's not even, if it's not a lie, it's an incomplete truth, where it's a snapshot. A picture's worth 1,000 words, but you live a lot longer than those 1,000 words. And your whole day isn't, if this is you all day, that's a really boring fucking person to be, because I never want to live like that.
Yeah.
But if that's the only thing that you have as identity, then nobody can ever take that away from you, especially when the world is in a place where you don't have a lot of definitive direction. The only thing you do have are the things that you put on. You label yourself as, this is a part of my identity, this is who I am, this is the shroud in which I'm going to go out into this uncharted territory. So the more people I can get on my side that hit that like button, that kind of live in that same atmosphere, it's going to give me that much more, I'm going to be more fortified by it. So all that, I see this is just a perfect storm for the ills that were kind of already there. We just amplified it. You know, the partisanship, it's not like it wasn't there before.
All sorts, but like one great example is if you look at vegans versus carnivores right now. Has nothing to do, like, it's depending on what side of the fence you are, the other one could technically have something to do through the indirect measure of like overall health, making you more susceptible. But like fundamentally speaking, whether you're vegan or carnivore, it makes like that has no effect on whether or not you come into contact with the virus.
And I would go back to that, okay, these are two definitive opposing camps.
Yeah, but they're getting violent. Like
that's the story of humanity though, right?
It's
my tribe, I'm going to plant this flag, my tribe is going to go out and conquer, or it's going to come across another thing that is a conflicting thought, and we're going to have this sought after, you know, or it's going to be sorted out as time dictates. It's one of those things, again, the truth in that matter is like none of these things actually have impact. Are you talking to the people at the CDC who do have good information, and doctors who are publishing information out on what COVID-19 is, how you can contact it, how you can't, like there are people who you should be listening to, and then there are the people who talk the loudest. That's the problem with this whole system of social media. Yeah. People who have great information are often not the ones who are the best self-promoters, are often not the ones who are the most entertaining, and are often not the ones who can captivate the right amount of attention. So when everybody in that public sphere has equal playing field, it gets lost in the noise. Yeah. So now your carnivore versus your vegan argument is going to be the loudest argument possible, where the guy who's actually giving you information probably not going to get hurt.
Crazy idea. Eat both.
Yeah. Balance.
Yeah.
The middle.
Whoa. No, but also like mentioning that people, the other fact is that the people that have the best information, I've noticed, are not immune to not having any idea how to convey it in a helpful way.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen people that have unequivocally correct information that are basically saying, like, if you're going out right now, you're a selfish asshole that's killing people. And the amount of times I've seen that reposted, it's like, that is the worst possible way to negotiate someone into, like, understanding your point of view.
Especially when that person is not committed to a logical argument. So it's like, we talked about this a little bit earlier. If I'm coming into the conversation, we were talking about the toothpaste, and you're like, okay, I'm willing to hear what you have to say, right up until the point where I hear that we're not talking about the same thing. Mm-hmm. So if I'm coming up to you and I'm having a logic-based conversation and you start to interject feelings, faith, emotions, all the rest of those things, okay, we either have to come to a new set of terms. Are we going to talk about these things, or are we going to talk about these measurable things? And if you can't measure it, well, then we just have to leave this open for interpretation. Yeah. And if it's open for interpretation, therein lies the problem when you're trying to extrapolate an actual solution for a big problem like this. Now, I'd say that there's space for both in the world. Yeah, like I never want to take that away from somebody. They're like emotion and all the rest of that kind of stuff. Like, be who you are. There's a whole host of things that are associated with that. Problem becomes when emotions are trying to dictate outcomes that are based in reality.
When emotions affect logic and blind you. That's always been like, have you followed the herbivore, keto, carnivore versus vegan sort of narrative?
I mean, I wouldn't say that that's something that I'm like up to the minute on, but I know of it just by doctrine of my background. Yeah. And I've seen the factions, and it's just always kind of like, all right. Yeah.
It's the thing that I've always noticed, because like obviously the animal cruelty is a very large factor in being vegan.
Right.
And like, I am so okay with that as the reasoning for being vegan. My problem is when those emotions overstep into faulty logic or like bad science. Yeah. And then that starts to be, because it's very hard to make the case that anyone on a ketogenic or carnivore or just generally omnivorous diet is like in it for an ethical or moral reason. Mm-hmm. So the only reason they could ever arrive there is if they really thought that was the best like decision given the information that they have. Right. Whereas that isn't actually true of the plant-based one.
It's one of those things where even there's a sense of piety that comes across inside of the I'm doing this for a higher purpose other than just for me eating and sustaining a normative life, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the problem with piety is that it is extremely subjective, meaning even if you get into the tropes of where I'd say religion starts to come into this place, well, okay, because you have this, food is religion. I think health is religion. I think wellness is religion, and it has the same, at least on the logical side of it, it has the same pockets where, okay, if you're following this to the T, then you're going to run into a conflict right here, right? So in every way, shape, or form, if you are committed to that extreme version of veganism, vegetarianism, I'm at no point in time, if you're just making decisions for yourself, totally fine. Mm-hmm. When you become evangelical and you start to point at other people and you're saying, well, you're a bad person because you don't do what I do, where in your logic does that same ethics conversation come for an actual person? Because you have higher ethics for what is livestock than actual people. You don't know why this person is eating this way. You don't know what their circumstances are. You don't know what their background is. You don't know any of these other things, but we predispose our piety onto somebody else.
Yeah. And it's also that it affects the unfortunate part of that is that, and like with coronavirus outbreak and all that sort of stuff included, like anything that becomes high stakes and becomes emotional or becomes ethical in debate, sort of falls like to this ultimate fate of the more serious of a matter it is, the more likely you're going to fail to be diplomatic and actually get people to understand why, or like convert people to your viewpoint. Like, because every single one, the more emotional it is, the more like percentage of all of the stories on social media or like posts you see are like just plain attacks.
Yeah, because it's vilifying. You have to vilify the other side. It's not even an argument where for me personally, I can sit across from somebody and have completely different viewpoints and have completely different point of departure, not share anything that's based, but I'm looking for the human element inside of that conversation. I think that is something that you have to evolve and you have to practice and you have to work through. So as a practitioner or as a trainer or as anybody who was working in, I'd say, high-end luxury gyms, that's not my life. That's not where I came from. That's not what my lexicon of understanding was based off of. If I couldn't relate to you, how effective would I be at motivating you is where that base of departure is, right? So if I'm going to be learned enough to understand, well, maybe let me change the lens. Let me understand where you came from. What's this mean to you? Why does that get you to do the thing that you're doing? What's the why? If you find the why, then maybe you can shape yourself to understand, well, this is not for me, but I can appreciate why you do it. More power to you. Are you hurting anybody? Are you vilifying anybody? Are you taking away somebody else's happiness? If you're not doing those three things inside of my book, I'm never going to throw you under the bus. I'm never going to throw you out. I think everybody needs to be involved in that conversation because you shape good thoughts not from having 100% agreement with the person, but I want the contrast. Yeah. I want that, not abrasiveness, but I want to be able to challenge my thoughts. And often you see people committing to those camps because they're not really committed to that idea that they actually put out. So if you were truly sound in the belief system that you're whatever it is, if I'm going to be a carnivore and I'm only going to be a carnivore, I'm actually going out and I'm hunting squirrel in the park every day, you know, whatever the case is, if you want to be on that fringe group, cool. Nobody would ever be able to dissuade you anyway. So why would you have to engage in a combative argument with somebody? It's like, no, this is the best way for me to eat. It makes me feel this way. It's going to be X, Y, or Z. Yeah, cool. All right. You never have to do that. Problem is that people don't even believe what they're saying. It's just reinforcement.
Well, yeah, people are scared to be proven wrong because then that implicates a lot more work for them to do.
It does. It's a huge amount of work to admit that you're wrong, or you might be wrong, or you might have some uncertainty.
Well, and it's like, I think a large part of the work is like when you have your worldview that you've constructed and operated on broken, it's a lot of work to just like in tedium and relearning and things like that to just piece it back together and to start operating again.
Yeah.
So for a lot of people, the easy way out is like, I'm just going to fight you.
Yeah. And I have to be right. And it does at all costs.
Yeah.
I practice breaking my reality constantly. I think that if you can't question life, I don't know if that's a life worth living. And I don't know if you actually do evolve to the highest fulfillment of what yourself can be if you're not constantly challenging the things that you thought yesterday were absolutely true.
Yeah. I think there was a saying that was like, I'd much rather have questions I can't answer than answers I can't question.
Exactly.
So...
Man, that's a bar right there, dude. I want that on the shirt.
For sure. Well, this has been kind of a meandering way to get into it.
Oh, shit, we're doing the pod?
Yeah, why not? Why not? No.
I thought we were just hanging and drinking coffee.
Yeah, I was shitting on vegans. Yeah, I don't know when that's going to start because we really did just sort of like fade into that.
Dove deep.
But I guess the first thing, if we are starting Sprackle podcast format, I keep thinking, and I always thought when I was going to make the podcast, originally it was going to be a Polymath podcast, then it turned into Sprackle podcast because I thought that was a better launch pad as far as like the range of people that I really did want to interview being more than just polymaths. I always assumed that it would let me get into like professional, scientific, whatever minutia with the people that I knew. But every single time so far, and I just recorded another interview yesterday with a good friend and roommate of mine, Adrian, and I learned so much about like the personal stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to realize like all of the relationships I've developed in New York, pretty much like without exception, have been in some sort of like skills bartering or professional sort of like all ships rise with the tide thing. But very few of us have ever just shot the shit. You know, like, we don't even have a couch in this apartment. Like, we're very, like...
I told you, man, this is our Steve and Woj stories right now.
We're, like, very much, like, on the up sort of starving artist creators. And so I think we forget we have time to really, like, have the conversations about the less actionable, less, like, give value sort of things. And it's really funny because like all these interviews for me have been like amazing opportunities to have that time to hear the stories and things like that just wouldn't ever get a fighting chance in like passing conversations. So like I loosely know what your world is kind of like now. I know that, well, at least I assume from your Instagram handle that you at some point were a trainer.
Yeah.
I don't really know anything that came before that. And I just, if you have a synopsis and then...
Right on, man. Well, I'm glad that you loosely know, because I don't. That's my biggest take on this whole situation is like, the more I know I don't know. That's the wandering story that is a trainer called Tony. That is Tony Vidal. That is whatever creative I'm going to be in the next iteration of this whole cycle. I do want to go back through what you were just saying, that, you know, there is going to be a silver lining to this whole Corona thing, that people do have to pause. And when you do have to hit that hard pause, maybe you get to find a little bit something else that digs deeper, that penetrates the normal biases and makes you have to look at the world a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And that's where the preface of opportunity always exists, at least for me. And I say that to say I am a journeyman spirit in this wellness conversation. I started off at the bright eyes and bushy-tailed sense of, I'd say maybe 17 or 18, working in my first gym. It was a Gold's Gym, Garden City Park, Long Island. I went to the gym because in high school, I never was really the most athletic of person. I started off playing football, but at that point in time, I was a center. And if anybody out there in the listener world understands what a center looks like, morphology-wise, wasn't really the ones that the cheerleaders was chasing after, you know? Got to be a big dude, stay in the middle, just be able to move a lot of mass and like try to take off when you can. Short of that, I made it to the next summer and I actually went to a college and I thought I was going to be playing center in college. And then I saw what actual centers look like. And it was like, oh, you guys are twice my size, way faster. Yeah, this is not going to be the path for me to go forward and have success, right?
Yeah.
So once you face that reality, here's who I am, here's who I define myself as, and oh, this ain't going to work. So what else? They cut, so Title IX comes into play.
What's fun? So I don't know anything about sports ball.
So center is the guy who literally sits in the middle. The football play cannot start until the center snaps the ball, right? So there's a quarterback, the guy who's throwing the ball, and there's the big dude that's like sitting in front of him who has his hand on the ball before you have to, like, as soon as he moves your hand, you are definitely going to get hit. That's essentially what the center is. There's no play where you can't not be obliterated by somebody that's on the other side that's just really waiting for you to flinch and hit you with everything that they have, right? Gotcha. That was essentially the position. And I can't even tell you that it was a skills-based position. It was one of those things that actually...
It was a mass-based position.
It was mass, and I could do long snap. So it was like, all right, this guy's big. We can put him in here. He's kind of a wedge, move his feet around. But long snap, meaning that even if they knocked me over, the quarterback had a little bit more time to throw the ball. So I could throw it back a little bit further, slow that guy down who was trying to kill that other guy. It's just kind of like, how much time can we buy? If you can get 5 seconds off on this.
How long can I take to fall over with this person?
That's pretty much what it is. That's all of the, like, nothing on the football. If you're watching football, nothing past that front line. If they're not really locked in, the sport doesn't work, you know? So that at a certain point, you know, in high school it worked. Once you got to college, that jump in skill set and level and ability was significant. I was at a D1 school and Title IX came in and they cut the whole football program, just went all basketball. That's legitimately what happened. So
Title IX is at the...
Title IX is a fairness act that went into play for every university, D1 universities and down, had to have equal spending for both male sports and female sports. Gotcha. And since there is no equivalent, football is a massive boondoggle on your sporting expenditures inside of a college university. You got to have the stadium, you got to have broadcasting rights, all the rest of that kind of stuff. There's nothing that the women's sports has that equals that. So they're just kind of like, guess what? Sorry, guys. I know we brought you over here for this thing. This is going to be a soccer stadium now. Because we got 2 of those teams. We only got 1 of this team. Get out of here. And, you know, when you have to hit that reset button, you got to reevaluate where you want to go. Yeah. And I didn't want to carry around all this extra weight because it just didn't have a functional purpose. So once I got past that, I was like, well, maybe let me start doing some of this exercise stuff. I was in school for computer science at that point in time. I got my first job as a programmer at 18. And at 18, bought my first car right out of like the summer. It was my only friend who was driving around doing all the rest of that stuff. I was like, you know what? Let me get into the fitness thing because I'm locked in the computer all day. I need something to take some stress off my mind and ease some tension. And as I'm going through that, I started liking it. I was like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, this whole workout thing is not too bad. I'm going to go through my lunch break. Then maybe I'm going to go after work. And then I just became a gym rat who was just kind of around there. And, you know, if I'm into a thing, I'm extremely into it. That's my always been a thing that is kind of like a characteristic or a trait.
Was it the amount of learning that you had to do when you started, or?
I think it was the amount of learning, and then there is something that comes along with the level of confidence that you see when you are making actual change in the mirror.
Yeah.
And once you start to see that, it can be a very addicting trait to chase down. And you're starting to see the weights go up, and you're starting to see stuff. I was always kind of in that weight room strong, but didn't really understand what I was doing. I can tell you, strength and conditioning in that era for what I was doing in sports was horrible. Like, none of my coaches actually knew what the hell they were doing. Never touched a weight before. They would just walk in, do power cleans, day one, go for it. And I was like, wait a minute, what? I don't even know what you're talking about.
Wait, that seems like power.
It's like 4 different moves put into one move.
Have fun.
And there's I knew none of those successive moves, right? So there is a graduated state to earn that right to do that, right? But day one, that's never a thing that you should ever give somebody inside of the gym. But at that point in time, the science of exercise wasn't really that prevalent. So I know all and well that I was around stuff that I shouldn't have been doing. And that's why I didn't really have an affinity for the science of exercise. I actually didn't get into that deeply until I got into a car accident. The car accident made me stop going to school, made me stop going to the gym entirely, and I had to do rehab. And as I'm doing this rehab, I'm starting to learn and see, this is a system just like that's a system, the computer. Mm-hmm. There is a if statement and an else statement nested inside of me, just like this thing that I'm looking at all day, typing away, doing this data interchange. So if this is heard, the opposite side needs to be doing this, then I can kind of repurpose it and I can reprogram what the outcomes are. Light switch, change my mind. Hey, this whole exercise science thing seems really compelling. I'm going to leave computer science and go to exercise science. And I can tell you that is a horrible way to navigate through a scholastic system. None of these classes line up.
What year was the move?
This was so I was transitioning. It was in my sophomore year. So yeah, totally not the way to do that. This is just the first turn, my friend. Nice. So make that turn. I'm going to be a physical therapist. I'm going to jump into, because I just saw this physical therapy dude. He's kind of young. He's fit. He's doing all that stuff. I'm going to be a physical therapist. Start going through the rigmarole of physical therapy. And at that time, it was not advanced like it is today. Had physical therapy looked like it does today, I probably would have stayed on that route. But it was essentially what I was seeing is a system that just kept you on the same path and just ran out the clock until you either ran out of money or you ran out of interest in being here. So there was no advancement to, I want to get you to return to the thing you were doing. It was just kind of like, yeah, this is a scam for insurance. I'm going to keep you on this path, turning this wheel until one of us gets tired of each other. Yeah. And then we just find somebody new to put inside here, right?
Yeah.
That was not my thing. So I didn't stay there long. Left for physical therapy, went to athletic training. Athletic training, a little bit more on the field, running around with people.
So you finished the degree in... Oh, okay. So this is before the,
This is all still going into succession.
Okay.
So physical therapy, athletic training, more on the field with the athletes. They're running around. They get hurt, come back and forth. You got to do all the rest of usually the guys that are wearing the khakis and running out and wrapping you up and taping you up, right? So I want to be on the field. I want to be back inside here. That sounds awesome. It's kind of sports nursing, but they don't call it that. So you have to do all the base triage where if there's an emergency happening right here, I got to be able to do all the things that would allow me to not kill this person, but then also bring them back to return to play. All that tremendous amount of information shaped everything that I would later do inside of the wellness arena. But at that point in time, these people were not getting paid anything. I should also say, caveat to that, while I'm going through this program, I was a full-time trainer at a pretty established luxury gym inside the city. So holding that course load, I had maybe 30 clients. I'm doing a full day's worth of studying inside of school. When I got to the point, now this is ending my senior year undergrad, I'm doing my rounds, I'm doing rotations, I'm working with teams, I'm doing all the rest of that stuff. I talked to the head of the department, what can you expect to be making out of this if you're working with this team? And that, when he told me how much they were making, and I knew that I made that 2 years ago, I was like, okay, this is not the path for me. I got to change again.
So wait, you were working at a upscale gym in this city, but still going to school?
So I went to Long Island University. That's where I ultimately ended up, which Long Island University is in Brooklyn. Right downtown Brooklyn, pretty quick trip back and forth. I jumped around to maybe 3 different schools in that storyline. and ended up in the Brooklyn location because I was living downtown Brooklyn with my then girlfriend at the time. And it was just really convenient. They had a really good sports program, and that's kind of why we picked the neighborhood.
Is it the campus that's right next to the Brooklyn Bridge, Williamsburg Bridge?
Right over the. So it's right over the. It's closer to the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge. So if you're coming right over the bridge, it's right down there.
I was falling off my bicycle there in many creative ways.
As have I.
great biking spots.
I've been over there. I've gotten hit by cars over there. It is a fantastic space to ride around.
Okay, so that sounds like a reasonable commute then. I was like, wait, Long Island, like further into where you would have a car at least seems like it would be.
Yeah, by the time I moved to the city, I sold my car because it just didn't have much purpose or function. But
sorry to take you off track.
No, man, it's all good. It's a long and wondrous story. It's like, all right, you want to get the full spectrum of where Tony came in. Finishing up that athletic training thing, once I realized that they weren't making any money, I then had to figure out what to do because now before I finished undergrad, I've had more credits than some graduate degree people had. And my professors were like, no, you can't change again because you're just going to live in this university if you do this one more time. You have, too much information on too many different things that are kind of related, but not exactly in the same direction.
Were you getting student loans or scholarship or?
Took out loans, had student loans, had paid some out of pocket, but in the whole grand scheme of things, it was just a really expensive way to go through and try to figure life out.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, those fields that I was trying to decide between would ultimately end up being the same field. Like today, it's one track, which makes so much more sense.
They sound like they all are very critical to the other things.
They all have almost the exact same coursework up until the last year. And that's why I didn't find out many times through that story up until the last year. Because it would take you into a radically different position. It's like, okay, here's going to be your life. You're taking a snapshot and looking at life. It's like, this sucks. I don't want to do any of this. Get me out of here. And after you go through that a couple of cycles, you kind of have to make the decision. All right, hey, I can't be with the one you love. You got to love the one you're with, right? And I'm here. Okay, you got all of these different pieces of information. You should finish off with exercise physiology. And there's just kind of like, well, what is that going to do? Well, you have a little bit more ambiguity because you can go into each one of these fields because you know enough about each one of these fields. Undergrad in ex-phys, changed into graduate in ex-phys, and since then have been going through processes where I leverage the information that I have to open up other doors out on the field. So I finished my graduate program. I also got to the point where at the gym that I was at, which is still one of the most renowned, if not the top end gym inside of New York City, I found that I had too much on my resume to actually make sense for me to stay inside that same position. And at that point in time, they weren't really letting people move up from training to anything else. It was kind of a cap here. Hey, you can be a training manager, and that's it. So I see this innovation happening. I see all these things happening inside the world, and I'm constantly training C-level and above people who are telling me these stories of innovation, who are telling me, how they got to their point where they were like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to change, I'm going to innovate, and I'm going to go here. And that's how I got my X, Y, and Z of success. So you can't keep hearing that same story over and over again. And then I feel like, well, I don't think this person's radically different from me. And in fact, I'm teaching this person. If they see value in me, and I know I can motivate this leader for all intents and purposes, I'm having conversations with somebody who is radically in a different atmosphere than I am, and I'm giving them life information that they're taking and then changing their lives and making it exponentially better, but I'm still in the same spot. That's not a good system. I got to get out of the system and understand where that can go. So, long story less long, jumped off in a crescendo of a way, left my employment at that point in time after I graduated, and I was in a fog of confusion between where's love life going, where's life going in this direction, what's professional going to be, and I left and I had to get off the grid, and I went to Central and South America, did some backpacking, some soul searching, some reading, and just started to formulate that idea of what I wanted to become and where was I going to go and how was I going to find innovation and here's all this stuff I have. I have all these identity things that I'm walking in with. I'm a tech person, but I'm a fitness person. I'm this, I'm that. I'm a trainer called Tony. That's just what people called me. But I had a lot of other things that I knew I could do. I was also DJing at that point in time. I was also passionate about a lot of things, and I didn't want to be defined by any one of them. The problem with that is it's kind of hard to find that path. It's going to be this, hodgepodge of stuff. So when I came back to the States, saw opportunities to then take that information and leverage into opening up a business, traveling overseas into Germany with this fitness and tech, because fit tech was now a thing. It's like, it wasn't when I was starting it earlier. It was like, these two things are never going to meet, Tony. Why would you put the peanut butter with the jelly? This is dumb. Stop it. Oh, wait, peanut butter and jelly is a really good thing. It's a whole fucking industry built off of this now. Yeah. So it's before your whoops. This is before all the rest of this stuff. Fit tech was not a real, your Oura rings and all of that. Fit tech wasn't a real thing until it became a real thing. And that gave me the opportunity to go stay in Germany for a little bit, work on some machine learning, work on some really advanced innovative strength training modules that I then brought back to the States when I was finished over on that side and started to shape the landscape over here. And I think that's probably how we ended up crossing paths, because that put me in the biohacking community, that put me in the pathway of all of these entrepreneurs, breakfast with nerds. They're just kind of like, this dude's been here. This is like, yeah, I have. I was the only one at this party for a little while. But now everything's coming together. So hopefully that was as entertaining as it was long.
Yeah, well, no, I love
that's where I came into the play.
How long? Because travel's one of those things that I always wish I did more of, because the one time I internationally traveled was the single most pivotal experience of my life.
Yeah.
And I've just never done it again, because it's still so hard to justify. But how long were you backpacking for?
This was, as long as I could sustain, was about 3 months.
That's a long time. That's a pretty long time to.
Yeah, it was essential. And I would say that travel is one of the most formative things that shaped my life up to this day. I'd say the relationships that you make with people who are imprinted on you throughout life are always going to be things that have massive impact. But if I look at everybody that I really do have an affinity for, they have a travel story. And it is honestly one of the most in-depth ways to get in touch with yourself and really sit with the fact that a lot of what we define ourselves through ego isn't true when you get outside of the context that you know. So if I'm going into a place where I'm not native language, dialect, and I'm not, around here, there's no way. If I'm backpacking through Central and South America, I'm going to tell you right now who sticks out like a sore thumb. It's like a foot taller and 100 pounds heavier than most of the people that are over there. Like, who the hell is this dude? Why are you here? I know, right? But people are going to come up to you and they're going to have a question for you. Wait, where did they make you? Where are you coming from? And here's all the stuff that's confronting.
Are you just really, really lost?
Yeah, exactly. How? What has brought you here? But I think people asking you that question and projecting that energy onto you makes you have to ask yourself that question. And ultimately, I think if you do grapple with that man in the mirror, so to speak, you end up coming out on the other side with some deeper meaning.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any specific moments where you can think back and be like, there was a change or a shift there?
100%. I'm amongst one immediately right now. I would say, so the lessons that you need to learn in life, better stated, the most important lessons that you have to learn in life, you will continue to face them until you actually do learn them. And one, I think, was that my reality, my perception, my understanding of the world is not a singular vision, meaning that there are competing narratives, visions, and all the rest of that. And there is no absolute, even though I might be right, there's no absolute in perspective. So going right back to the same nature of our conversation, how I was able to balance that, I could be right, but I have to be effective in order to move forward. If you're not effective, your rightness is irrelevant. Because what is this person asking you really? Why are they asking you it? And where is it going to evolve you to? So understanding that my actions had implications that were bigger than what I can understand was a pivotal lesson. And also understanding that the way that I saw reality wasn't the way that somebody else saw reality has a impact on the intentionality of what I do, because I'm trying to be observant as to what the competing narratives could be.
Did it have anything to do with you sort of being in a place where, because the second half of the interview with my friend Sean Michael, who did like actually 3 months as well, a trip to China, and he was originally going to go to a rural part of Spain because like in Spain, in certain areas, like there isn't anyone that's bilingual, and they will only encounter people that speak Spanish.
Right.
And then he made a snap decision on a subway one day in Chinatown, where he was like reading something in Spanish, and he was like, "All right, I'm getting ready for this trip. I think I understand what it means." And it was like, "Don't jump in front of a train," basically.
Yeah.
And then he realized like,
to live by.
Yeah, there was like another like poster or something that was in Chinese, and he looked at it. He was like, okay, there's no way I'm deriving anything from that. I have no goddamn clue what any of that says.
Yeah.
And so he was like, I love Sean because it's immediately like his first epiphany from that was, oh, well, obviously I need to go to China instead.
Yeah.
Because I want to be way more like clueless.
And you know what? I wish that I had that level of bravery, because that takes a different level of understanding. Mine was more about, honestly, identity and trying to see where my identity stemmed from. So my father's born in Panama, and I had never been to Panama, but my full name is Anthony Vidal, right? Very pronounced Latinx background, Latinx name. Panamanian culture is prevalent in Flatbush and all the rest of that, but we never really had the opportunity to express that. My father has a fully Spanish name. People call the house, our numbers listed, people just calling, assuming that you speak Spanish 100% of the time coming down the line. We never spoke it at home. Because when he was growing up out here, you had to make a choice. It's like, hey, you're going to be American or you're going to be Panamanian. You can't be both right now. And this is going to be the thing that's going to get you a little bit further. That's what his father told him. That's what my father told me. And that's how we kind of went through that whole matriculation process. So I've always been around this multicultural aspect of what New York City is, but I couldn't really identify where my multiculturalism came from. And I knew that I had this thing that my Latin friends would say, oh, you must be from here. Like, look at your name. You got to take pride in this thing. Like, where you going? It's like, well, that's not the reality that I know.
Yeah.
You know, you can speak, like, I hear y'all speaking, going back and forth, and I can pick up some of this, you know, and I can understand where you're going, but I have an affinity for somebody else's culture. It's not really mine. It's like I have an affinity for, like, I have deep passion, because I grew up out here, deep passion for West Indian culture. I see where that's at. I have deep passion for, you know, Caribbean, Latin culture all throughout. But Central America wasn't really something that I understood. It was like, oh, this is slightly askew. It's different. And I feel a calling to go back here and try to understand, well, where do we come from? Why do we exist here?
Yeah.
And
did you get a chance to, so as a kid, did you end up learning Spanish natively?
I mean, in school, but it wasn't something that I was pronounced with, and it wasn't anything that was reinforced at home. There's one thing to have it like in your background and you kind of have some words that are like there, but there's another thing to get full immersion. And this honestly was my first point of departure in full immersion inside of that atmosphere, because I do want to eventually learn how to speak it fluently. Hasn't been something that I've accomplished yet, but that was the first point of departure. And then I say also, like many great journey, a lot of that has something to do with, at least in my canon of history, some kind of crazy romantic story that's associated with that. It was like, I'm hit the point of no return. I need to hit this parachute button. I'm going to jump out this fucking plane right now. It's like, this can't go any further. I'm going to go ahead and jump.
I can't quite remember, but I sure as hell hope there is a parachute in there.
Yeah, I don't know if I packed it every time. And that is hindsight looking back. Yeah, you should pack that chute from time to time.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So that's what started that wanderous trip. And it was something that was transformative for sure. And I do have a need for another one of those trips. And it's one of those things that I feel the more frequency you have with that in life, you probably have a little bit better outcome. And on the point of departure where I was saying this is a second awakening, I wish that I had one of those trips a little sooner rather than later.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sorry for any extra noise. There's we're right next to a main road, and we certainly don't have double pane windows in this apartment.
Man, you don't have to apologize. This is a post-apocalyptic podcast.
Oh yeah, that's true. We are in the wasn't dumbasses driving around? All they know we're trying to make some art in the wake of the end of the world.
That's exactly what it is.
Good heavens. That's amazing. Travel is one of the, do you have any sort of perception on when travel becomes a bit frivolous? Like, would you rather live a period of your life in the lane and then wait until you feel like you're sort of hitting that asymptote or plateauing, and then like, all right, I need something to challenge like how I'm looking at everything again, and then do it? Or do you think like a regimented, like it's just good to do?
It's hard to say because everybody's going to be different. Right. And I would tell you that I think my scenario where I would find the most success is if it was regimented. I will also say that often, much like everything in life, it's going to come to you when you need it. And I'm okay enough with accepting all the things that I do know in the measurable sciences, and that's where my background is. But then I also know where that has its limitation. And I know where, after a point in time, I don't have answers for every single thing. There's going to be something that's going to be an incendiary incident that's going to make you have to get back to that. And that's what I'm on the front of right now. Like, I'm telling you right now, 2020 started off as a hell of a fucking year. And it's telling me to do everything that I need to do. All right, you know what time it is. Barring a travel ban, which we kind of have to be underneath right now.
Slightly unfortunate.
Yeah, I know where I would be going. And there's a reason for that. I think as an overachiever, as somebody who is multidisciplined in a lot of different aspects, we tend to get lost in the outcomes, and we tend to celebrate everything that we were talking about. Even the preface of this conversation is a precious time because we're always running. You wouldn't be in this city if you didn't love that chase. It just would never happen. Look at the shit that we justify to be inside of this city. It's insanity. But I would not survive in any other circumstance. There's a point in which, and there's probably a measurable aspect to it, you can look at your sleep patterns and you can see all the rest of the stuff where you start to prioritize the chase and you have an affinity for the chase and you are in the grips of that, okay, I got to stay lean, leaders eat last, I got to do all of this startup, everything that you read in those startup culture books, right? Mm-hmm. You got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, got to do all the rest of this kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, you need to have some checks and balances. And if you don't, reality is going to check and or balance you in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, yeah.
So I say that all to say, in a perfect scenario, I would definitely have it all regimented. I have not seen perfection since I started life. So it comes when it needs to come, and when it does, I appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah. That's, I definitely... There's something I said, because sleep has been my kryptonite in the chase. And actually, just as an aside, would you say you're someone that would like live the entirety of your life here, or would you want to hit like a critical mass and then move somewhere else and sort of live out the rest of it?
I'll always have a closet in New York City.
Gotcha.
That's literally all I need. I'm a Brooklyn born, Brooklyn raised, Brooklyn through and through person, and to the death of me, that nobody's ever going to take that from me. I've lived in the good times in Brooklyn, I've lived through the bad times in Brooklyn, and I feel like I've earned the right to be around. I've been robbed at places where they have, seasonal like scones coming into place now. It's like, all right, you guys got heirloom what? It's like, this used to be the crack house. It's like, why the fuck am I going to leave now? It's like, no, fuck that. I'm not going to go through all of that. So yeah, I'm going to keep that chip on my shoulder. But at the same point in time, I want to be a world citizen. I want to be able to go and come back a stranger every single time. And if there's something that is new, fun, and exciting, I want to have my little closet that I could dip in, put a couple pair of shirts in there, some shorts, whatever, be extremely minimal, have a nice bed. I don't even need to have any electricity running through it. It's like, this is literally for me to be here for this moment.
Like a studio in a warehouse or something.
Don't need anything extra.
Yeah.
Is this my closet? I got a room to wash up and all the rest of that stuff, and then let me get back out of here. That is the life goal. I want to have residency all over the world because I think I want to have impact all over the world.
Yeah. No, I love it. I've consistently, because I'm from a really small town, like grew up in the middle of the Apalachicola National Forest, and it's been quite the adjustment to go from living in the literal middle of a forest and swamp to New York City.
Concrete jungle, baby.
Yeah.
That's a big switch.
And I've talked to some of my friends that are also transplants about this, and there's a surprising number of us that really couldn't imagine, as of yet at least, being in New York indefinitely. Like, we'd never retire. Not that any of us really believe we'll retire, but like, we'd never retire here.
Yeah.
And so I think about Atlanta, because like I've been there a bit, and it's closer to the South, where I'm a little more like, where my roots are a little closer to. But like, then the question always comes up from some people is like, well, why are you here anyway then if you know you're not going to be here forever? And part of it's just like, I haven't figured this place out. Like, it's so, like, I'm so curious about it. Like, it's not solved, and it probably can't ever be solved. But right now, I just like, I have this vicious like inquisition. Is like, how are you to do New York properly? Like, how does that work?
I think there's several phases of it. And I think the New York identity story is really, for me, it's always going to be that coming from nothing and making something. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. You hear all the things that we have, those like, romanticized views about it. But realistically, shit is hard here. Mm-hmm. And it's going to test you. And no matter what time frame you're looking at, it's a story of haves and haves nots. That have side just goes up a little bit higher. So if you want to live here and be comfortable here, there's probably a barrier of entry that you have to cross, a threshold. Okay, to be comfortable by Manhattan standards, be comfortable by Brooklyn standards, Queens standards, where is that comfort? And people talk about New York as it's this one monolithic thing, but it's really not. Mm-hmm. And I like the regional aspect of it because there's identity that goes into every region. We're trying to blur those lines, or you're seeing that dissolve away as, a level of influence starts to move into the outer boroughs, and you're starting to see access change amongst that. They don't feel like they used to feel. This neighborhood used to feel distinctly different from any of the bordering neighborhoods, and this is just in one borough. Mm-hmm. There is a constant story of evolution, a constant story of change that is inside the city. I think that that's a part of that chase, because if you're not in front of the pack, you're going to get left out of that conversation. Mm. So I don't know what success in that story is. I think it's being able to get up, being able to thrive, being able to rally when shit hits the fan, so to speak. And you kind of keep innovating. You kind of keep reprocessing, reinventing, never stop evolving.
True.
That's a New York story.
Well, I guess at the end of the travel ban, you mentioned that you already decided on the next place you want to go, right? Or
I haven't. I do like you putting that out there, but what would be the next place that I would like to go? Honestly, there is going to be something that always pulls me back to that magic that was in Central and South America, but I would want to break new barriers. Unfortunately, some of the areas that I would want to travel to would be hotbeds of contention right now. Yeah. It's like,
such as anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it's just kind of looking around. It's like, I do have a further European story that I have to tell. I do have, I want to be a world citizen. I really do, in no small way, in no over-exaggerated sense. In my industry, I want to be the Anthony Bourdain of this industry. Mm-hmm. And not to be his derivative, but that's the closest example of the kind of storytelling and the kind of art that I want to make to show that, this movement system is akin to the food system, where I'm not going to vilify you for either camp that you're in. I just want to understand what your culture is about. I want to understand why you do what you want to do. And I think this is a really convenient vehicle for us to both get some sweat, make a bond, change some ideas, and maybe hopefully we reevaluate how we were looking at the world at the end of it. That's what I want to do. And I don't have a cap for that. I think that's a world story. Some places are going to be more favored than others. I'd prefer to be in the next trip to be a tropical trip, just to be honest about it. Somewhere where, the corona can't exist in that over 100-degree kind of temperature. So take me there.
133.
Yeah, I'm trying to get...
It's going to be tough to find that, but, give a few more years of global warming.
Arizona, here we come.
There we go.
That's where I'm going. All right. It's already set up.
I just love being able to do this so much because, this, I just feel like wouldn't happen at Starbucks.
Yeah.
We had a great conversation. Despite the fact that in retrospect, we probably shouldn't have been there or the next place or been out that day at all.
You want to give them some context on how crazy that actually was?
Yeah, I mean, okay.
Because that's too good of a story not to set up how this actual conversation got set up.
Yeah, so the backstory for this starts, what was that, last Wednesday? In
the hellscape of today's post-corona apocalypse. Yeah. I don't know what days mean anymore, Coy.
Yeah, it was we had like a meeting scheduled sometime last week, and for context, we're filming on a Monday. That's the one.
Sure.
That
days
day.
matter.
Day, yeah. 0 day. 0 day mark 2.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we decided to meet up, and then like we had always passed. There's a lot of people from Breakfast with Nerds, which is this bi-weekly or semi-weekly breakfast series that like a bunch of revolving people get together and then talk about their stuff. And I've met Tony at that, but then before that, I met him more, I guess, or less in passing at a Samsung keynote.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
I was hosting.
And it was movement and mindset.
Yes.
And we chopped up in the green room for a little bit, and I was filming a vlog like a test vlog for my good friend Dale, who also your good friend, I would.
For sure. We're in the same circle, man.
Yeah.
Circle of influence.
And so that ended up taking, we actually did end up posting that. It was just much later because we started to realize like, oh, this is really quality footage. But but I knew you were good people from having met you through that crowd anyway. And then after this second time we met at the breakfast, I didn't actually get added to the list somehow. And I'm very ADHD and spacey, so I just like forgot that it existed until I'd remember for like 30 seconds at a time and then see another squirrel.
Yeah.
And so I kept forgetting about it, and then finally got added back to the list, and then everyone met up, and I think I didn't go on one of the weeks that
I was there probably,
yeah, and then
vice versa. The
time that I did go, I think you were busy, and so I just reached back out and was like, we got to meet up or like we got to talk about something. So we met up and we talked about everything from your podcast to a bit of each of our backgrounds, my stuff in action sports. And this is like the day before the travel ban, I think. Or maybe the day of. This is the day of the travel ban. This is when the NBA's entire thing got canceled. This is like the country is shutting down in the specific hour that we're talking.
So while we're in Starbucks, I told you we were talking. I'm like, oh, they just closed the NBA.
Yeah, I was like, you check your phone intermittently, and I just kept seeing like the eyebrow raise, and then you put it back down, and you check it 10 minutes later. It's like, the world's ending. All right, well, cool. Let's finish this cold brew.
Yeah, we were there.
Yeah. And then because, if you're that far into it, why not? We tagged along to a what was it, Talent Hack event?
Talent Hack Town Hall, I guess you can call it, which wasn't so towny because everybody else kind of knew what we had.
Or like understood the gravity of it, I guess. But we went to a pretty long talk with someone who we were talking about in the beginning, Sean T, who I'm largely unfamiliar with, but apparently was the mogul of influencers before influencers.
He was pretty big. And before, I think you'd be hard pressed to say that he wasn't one of the pivotal fitness influencers that would then shape the landscape for everybody else.
He's a character. I could see how that could be the case.
It's kind of like a really like vibrant Will Smith of fitness kind of thing. Yeah.
He's got that like half-cocked smile when he's being facetious that like is very Will Smithy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we listened to that, and that ended at like 2 or 3 o'clock or something like that. But then even just trying to get there.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're overstepping.
We're the most ridiculous part of the story. It's held at this like interactive revolving pop-up shop place, which it's like a pretty cool idea. Basically, if you have a like wellness or whatever tech company or product, you can set up shop in one of the rooms that's like a demo room in this 3-story sort of experiential place.
Yeah, if you have an internet-based company and you don't have a storefront, this was a great way for you to have a in-person interaction with whatever your product was.
Yeah, and so they have a bunch of samples, and then also like a small inventory that you can buy from if you decide that like, oh shit, I want this now.
Yep.
So you don't have to wait for shipping or whatever else. And they had a few cool things on the first floor, and then you got to do the experience. And so we go upstairs. We're like first floor, and they mentioned there's a slide. And so I'm 12, and I'm like, okay. And so we go up to the second floor because obviously, or just logically, I would assume it progresses in from 1 to 2, but instead it progresses 1 to 3.
Yep.
Because you have to slide back down to 2. Mm-hmm. So we go up to 2 and they're like, oh, you got to go to the 3rd floor if you want the tour. And we just keep hearing, like, with every floor we go up, more and more about the tour.
You should also punctuate that with, it's as ominous as the world is ending outside. Yeah. Everybody in the store.
Yeah, we're the only people, besides the employees.
Only people that are there interactively touching stuff.
Yeah. Like, oh, this is really nice.
When everything is telling you not to touch stuff.
Yeah, we were even looking at the keyboardless typer thing that like slides your hair. Like,
put your hand in there.
There's no demo there. They're like, you know what? We're okay with that.
Yeah, we're not gonna put the glove out. You want to lay down on this bed that nobody else has laid down on?
And then so we end up going to the 3rd floor, and we get asked like 3 times in less than 2 minutes probably. And for context, we show up early, so like our meeting was like not completely truncated to the beginning of this event. So we walked there and we're like 20 minutes early. So we got time to kill. So we're on the 3rd floor. We're like, yo, you want to do this tour? And we're like, I don't know. I don't really know. That sounds kind of open-ended. Like, I don't know how long this is going to be. Hey, you want to do this tour? Well, I mean, and then like we like look around some other exhibits, and then like someone else like, well, if you want to do this tour, all you got to do is sign up here. And eventually Tony and I look at each other, we're like, yeah, sure. Why not? What else are we doing?
I'm here. You're like the 3rd person. I have a rule of 3s, and I think we're both strong-minded individuals who also show that the power of
the follow-up,
not even just the follow-up, suggestion and peer pressure essentially is what we felt.
Yeah. And so I was like, there's a slide. I want to go on this slide. Let's take the tour. I get to go on the slide if we go on the tour. And so I put in my email and everything, and I signed us up for the tour. We finally do it. And then we go down this slide, this like sketchy looking slide that likely hasn't been cleaned in multiple days.
There's no way that you can clean it.
Yeah.
It's impossible unless you're sliding down.
There was proof that it hadn't been, and all the shoe scuffs that were still there. Like that. So we go down the slide, have our bags, we go back to the 2nd floor where there's this very interesting sort of like, there's like different modules of the 2nd floor represented by different people who presumably work at those respective companies and not the actual venue.
No, they were character actors.
I know, but like one of them was just like not in the dude you got the drink from was like, I'm so fucking done with all this shit.
We're dying. I'm not doing this today.
I'm being paid to like come out in the apocalypse. I am not getting paid enough for this bullshit. Meanwhile, the other person was very into it.
Very bought in.
This girl that had like some sort of like aromatic like thing that she rubbed on the back of my hand, and she's like floating through the rooms, and the other guy on the other side is just like, yeah, she's really into this.
She's really happy about the survey. Please fill out a survey.
So we fill out a survey to find like what tailored version of this drink, and then we go through, and then in the next room there's like this sort of, it's basically like an Instagram installation for people to take pictures with.
The whole building is Instagram installation.
For like this, it's got like a rainbow, like clear plastic blind sort of thing that you walk through to get into a room to show wireless chargers. Like that was the entire setup there.
That didn't work.
Yeah. And we were being shown like a kitchen with like vegan Play-Doh, which, okay. And she starts saying, like, we're talking, and she's like, yeah, no, there's been no one really here all day and stuff like that. And she goes on about how she's from like Sweden, and she's been on a health kick, which entails going to the store and buying nothing but pasta and something else.
Yeah, she was getting ready for the end of the world.
So she's going on her end of the world health kick, which was buying boxes and boxes of pasta.
Makes sense.
And apparently the guy that was checking her out like coughed in his hand multiple times and then just like grabbed the boxes. So we're just shooting the shit, and with the wireless charging thing doesn't end up working, so we just start talking again. And basically I told her about influencers in the wild and how like she could have a gold mine of just submitting people in that space.
Constantly walking through there.
Yeah, and then she was like, yeah, but today there really hasn't been anyone out because of this whole like Corona thing. Why are you guys here? And then we just looked at each other. We were like, why are
we here?
Oh shit. And we realized like, oh right, there's an event.
Yeah, I think we were 20 minutes earlier we're like now 8 minutes late.
Yeah, and we completely lost all track of time. It was like, actually, we are here for an event on the 4th floor.
Yeah.
And so we checked the time. I think it was like 1:06 or something. We're about 6 or 8 minutes late, and so we're like, oh shit. So we get in the elevator, go up, and it luckily hadn't started yet. Yeah. But then like when we're there, there's like cheese.
Open food.
There's like an open plate of cheese with like probably, 80, 90 pieces of cheese. 8 or 9 toothpicks. And people are like, toothpick, eat, put back the toothpick. Yep. And I'm just staring at this plate like,
yeah.
Oh, that don't look too good. And so we were there for like, that was a long talk too. That was like 2 hours.
2 hours straight. I think we might have just had a fever dream. I don't think any of that was real. We might have just had herd immunity through the fever dream.
Quite frankly, I think we're actually dead right now.
That could be it.
This is where the afterlife is.
Fuck it.
It seems this is pretty close to normal life. I'm all right with it.
Hey man,
But yeah,
good stories, bad decisions. That's the whole thing.
And then I guess to bring it literally full circle, the very last thing that happened in the talk was a Q&A section where I told Tony, I was like, I got a question.
Yeah.
And so I was like, ask a question. And I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if it's a good enough question. And he was like, bro, I'm going to lose a lot of respect for you right now if you don't ask a question. And I was like, oh man, I want to. I just don't think it. And then someone else asked a question that was just absolutely played out and horrendous. And Tony was like, see, that's why you had to. I'm mad at you now. And so because of that, I was volunteered to start with Sprackle today. And,
right on.
And then we'll be switching over soon, presumably.
Hell yeah, man.
To film the Off the Strength podcast. So wrapping all of that up, I guess the fun, I don't know if that's a decent way to outro at all, but this is what we're doing, so fuck it.
Go for the outro, man.
Yeah.
Go for it. This is you.
The outro really, I don't have any planned outros other than the like script ones I recorded, but one thing I do allow in person, just in case my research doesn't quite get it all, is the things that you can be found at. So I know Off the Strength podcast.
For sure.
Available
definitely.
Everywhere podcasts are available.
It's on everywhere that you can listen, and subscribe to a podcast.
So does that include YouTube?
On YouTube, yes, we do have a YouTube presence, but it's not really that pronounced because our video isn't the craziest just yet. We are on Spotify, on iHeart Now, on the Apple. What is that?
Apple Podcasts.
Apple Podcasts.
That's what I got.
All of the. We're on Stitcher. We're on pretty much every one of the main distributors for podcasts.
Gotcha. And then Instagram, you personally.
Instagram is going to be a trainer called Tony. Mm-hmm. Which the name is kind of dubious, but it is that.
And then you also are looking for more, well, presumably, if we don't all die, in the apocalypse, speaking gigs.
Yeah, for the post-apocalyptic, landscape where you're going to have new, fun, exciting, when we're allowed to gather again, I'm actually pretty decent at navigating through how people should gather. I'm kind of like a little bit of a tastemaker in that aspect. Yeah. I think I like to set the vibe for the party and sit back and let people do what they do. Yeah. So whether that's hosting, whether that's moderating, whether that is just being a genuine person that could be in there and tell you, hey, man, that looks good on you. That's what you should do. Even in
an informal setting, like there was a stark difference between the first Breakfast with Nerds that I attended with you there and then the second one, which was just sort of like a cross-talking free-for-all. So it's subtle, but it's effective. And
I like to grab reins of this stuff, man, because I know people have the best of intention, but it's not always refined.
Organization's a skill.
Hey, this is what we need to do. Here's what I hear what you're saying. You need to talk to this guy. We're just gonna make this work.
Yeah. So on a larger scale, I'd be super stoked to see the kind of talks that you give in different contexts.
Hell yeah, man.
So yeah, where would people reach out to you on Instagram for that? Or
IG is probably where I'm going to keep it the most up to date. Honestly, I had a bunch of stuff scheduled that is just not happening right now.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't know.
And then
hopefully coming to you eventually.
Hopefully coming to you if you're still there on the other side.
Yeah, I'll still be talking. Yeah. I just don't know who's listening.
And I know you have a LinkedIn, but are you particularly active on there?
I am active on LinkedIn. I haven't posted as much, but I mean, you can definitely find me. That's Anthony Vidal. I don't have anything super crazy that I'm plugging on that side, but reach out if you got some crazy ambitious product or project that you need somebody to do some ambitious analytic approach and break down and get you from 1x to 20x. Yeah, that's my bag, man. I'm an amplifier by definition. I'm a complex problem solver, and I'm always looking for that thing that I don't know, because I think ignorance is ultimately a curable disease. Yeah. And I try to find my ignorance every single day.
That's awesome, man. Well, it's been a flippin' hoot
Whew.
I said a hoot and a half. I'm glad.
You said it was supposed to be dank. All right, we got a hoot and a half.
It was a dank hoot and a half.
There we go. All right,
man.
Post-apocalyptic cast done.
I do believe so. Thank you so much for
Thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Peace. And with that, we've reached the end of this episode, but not necessarily the end of the conversation. It is at this point I'm really going to pull out the but wait, there's more, because as I referenced in the introduction, the entire reason this episode exists was because we got together originally to record Off the Strength with myself as the guest. So to hear what happened with the roles reversed, I highly recommend tapping the link to episode 122 in the show notes. Off the Strength is a podcast that takes the blinders off the wellness space to dive deep with people like fitness professionals about pretty much anything but their day job in health and wellness. I love the premise, and since it's recorded at Gotham Podcast Studio, the production under normal circumstances is of course amazing, but you got to hear it for yourself. And as always, I hope this gave a boost to your morning, road trip, commute, or quarantine at this point. And thank you for making it all the way to the end, and I will see you over on Off the Strength and or in the next episode of the Sprackle podcast coming up this Sunday. Have a good one, guys.